Well, good afternoon, everybody. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to speak here. My name is Gijs Langeveld, but in English it's probably much easier to call me Chris. I'm a consultant on solid waste and resource management, and I've been in the business for about 15 years now. And one of the topics that I've been working on is food waste. Food waste mainly in cities, as cities have a large challenge on how can they separate their valuable streams. And we've set it up a blog which is called Beyond Food Waste, together with a good friend of mine, Kat Heinrich, in Australia, where we collect cases from around the world. Um, for today, I would like to discuss with you how food waste in cities can assist the development of more sustainable food value chains, and mainly focusing on creating business and investment opportunities. Um, so Let me have a look. The first thing that I would like to discuss with you is the challenge for cities. Then I'll dive a little bit deeper into the issue of food waste, drivers which there are to address the issue of food waste. And then the interesting part comes in, how would a business case look like? I've identified 4 business cases and investment opportunities for you, because that's what the forum is about, investment opportunities. Um, so the first thing is that cities are prioritizing to reduce carbon emissions and move towards circular economy. What we see around is that climate change is a big issue, which is recognized by national governments, but cities is actually the place where the change is, where they really realize the urgency of climate change. And this is a quote by Ricardo Cepeda Marquez, who is head of the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group. And what he sees is that cities are the first responders to that challenge. Another interview that we did was interviewing the Commissioner of New York City, Catherine Garcia, and her statement is that reducing food waste is a key strategy for cities to reduce their carbon footprint. So in the case of New York, organic waste is just over 30% of cities' residential waste stream, and it contributes to about 4% of New York's overall greenhouse gas footprint, which makes it incredibly important to figure out how to use it in a way that's beneficial to all of us. So the issue here is that organic waste, which rots in landfills, is a major contributor to greenhouse gases. So if you're into food waste, this quote you always see come by: if food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitting country in the world. Food waste has a large emittance because if it comes up into a landfill, it produces methane gas, and methane gas is a factor of 30 more a larger emitter than just carbon emissions, and that's one of the reasons why it has such a large footprint. So from a carbon point of view, it's very interesting to address. So if we dive a little bit deeper into the issue of food waste, what we see is that each phase contributes. Food waste in the consumption phase, that's the one at the end where the largest carbon footprint is. It's logical because what is wasted there has already been gone through production, logistics, storage, processing, distribution. So it's more than logic that that's what's wasted there has the largest carbon footprint. But if you look into the food waste itself, also the other parts are contributing. And if we have a look into per region, then what we see there are large differences in the regions where the food loss takes place. For example, on the left side, you see North America and Oceania and Europe, the more advanced parts of the world, where the large parts are in the consumption phase. while in the other parts of the world there is much larger food waste in the earlier phases of production, handling, and storage. So, but what we see is that overall the share of total food loss is around 35%. This value this wasted food is estimated worth is at least $1 trillion US dollars. So what we see is that the current end-of-life solutions for food waste are predominantly linear. It's either dumping, landfill, or waste to energy. Even in Europe and USA, the majority of food waste is actually not recycled. What happens, for example, in my own country, in the Netherlands, where we have the highest recycling percentage within the highest recycling percentages of Europe, is that food waste is still largely either collected as part of residual waste, because it's the most difficult waste stream actually for people to separate, because it stinks, it's wet, people don't like it. So it's difficult to see as a resource, so people don't treat it as a resource. And also separate collection is in most of the times not in place. So, where plastic waste is a global market, you see a lot of exports of plastics around the globe. Food waste is more like a national or a local market. This is mainly because food waste is characterized by a relatively high mass and low economic value per kilogram. So it doesn't make sense to transport food waste around the globe, economically wise. So there's a difference. So what are the main drivers to address food waste? The first driver is actually that it's a very nice resource. Recycling of food waste produces useful products like energy, compost, and animal feed, and it keeps the nutrients in use. So actually, from a circular point of view, you always want to have the organic stream separated from the industrial stream, and you can make nice new products out of it, which we've been doing for over 1,000 years. So it makes sense to do it. The second point of view is that it actually is a big opportunity for the Sustainable Development Goals, especially for the 1, 2, 3 goal, and reduce food loss along the production and supply chains, but also to reduce the consumption of food waste at retail and consumer levels. So it can be a large contributor by 2030. And the third one is that there is increasingly legislation which aims to reduce food waste. So what we see, for example, is in France that there is a ban on food waste. What they're doing there is that you are actually not allowed to waste it anymore, if not necessary. In the UK, there is a food waste reduction bill. From European Union point of view, there's a circular economy package where food waste is part of it. And there is a mandatory collection of bio-waste by 2023 coming in. But also in other countries, like, for example, in South Africa, there is a voluntary agreement. And maybe legislation is there even on its way. So more than one countries are also pressuring forward, either from societal pressure or from legislation, to do something with our food waste. So other drivers are collaboration through international networks. Cities have a couple of networks, for example, C40, CCAC, and the ISRA. But also companies are either being organized or organizing themselves more and more. For example, in REP has produced a quartal commitment 2025. With over 100 signatories to reduce the food waste. In the States, there is the Food Recovery Challenge, where organizations can take part of, and but also there are some first examples where the industry is organizing themselves. The International Food Waste Coalition is such an example. where they have a collaborative farm-to-plate approach against food waste throughout the food services value chain. So there is increasingly collaboration, but it can be extended more and more. So if we look into the business case, first we should have a look at the food recovery hierarchy. This prioritize prevention first, then recovery or redirection or redistribution, and finally it's about recycling. So if we have a look at this one, we can also have a look at the different business cases which come in. The first one is actually the highest one, is prevention. Prevention of food waste. It saves cost and reduces carbon emission. And there are a lot of examples out there, but actually this is the hardest one to do because in some cases there are direct financial benefits, but in some cases the benefit is actually for somebody else. But some examples which REFET gives is standardized date of labeling, or packaging adjustments, or waste tracking and analytics. There are companies providing restaurants and food services with data on which they can actually save the usage. But it's not only about the waste tracking. We visited a restaurant in New York where they already did it themselves, and it's also a cost perspective for such for restaurants, because the more food waste, the more you bought at the entrance, so the more money you've probably spent on the food, which is a cost issue. So from a business point of view, you can save money. The second business case is about redistribution. Redistribution of food to people reduces food waste, and it also improves the diet of people with low income. So there are various opportunities to have such a donation regulation. And this is from the States again, from REFET, where they did some examples. You can either do it by regulation, which actually helps. This is what in France worked. You can do it by donation matching software, using technology platforms to connect individual food donors with recipients. I think even here at my home we have such a software which works, and which is really nice because you also get into contact with your neighbors or with companies you never heard of, which are actually living around the corner. So, and the third one could be value-added processing, where you can actually make new high-end products out of the waste, such as soups or sausages or sauces or jams made from donated paprikas or carrots or whatever is being left. And the third business case is actually a two-step business case. The first part of this business case is collection of clean and valuable food waste streams, which can be recycled. So I explained what happened now with the collection, which ends up mostly at dump sites or landfills or waste to energy plants. But if you implement a new separate collection system for the organic streams and food waste, you can actually send it to a digester and produce energy out of it, and then produce compost out of it. So it's not only energy anymore as with a waste to energy plant, but you can actually put the nutrients back into the ground. And this is actually a part which is quite challenging, especially in highly dense areas. In Milan, they have implemented a system for food waste with kitchen bins and compostable bags, which is actually working quite well. But personally, I've done a project in the Netherlands with all the largest cities on how can you start collecting food waste in highly dense areas. So you can imagine that if you live in an apartment, it is quite difficult to to keep your waste separated and also to bring it away separately. This can be more challenging than it looks like. It's not just putting a bin somewhere. It's actually making it easy for people to separate the waste. And so we tested about 10 different behavioral interventions. And what we saw is that actually, if you provide them the basics in infrastructure, if you learn them how to do it, and if you actually motivate those people to do it, then at least 1 in the 5 households will participate, which is for cities like Amsterdam and Rotterdam a major change. And this was only a scientific research, so probably in real time you can realize better results. So this is about collection. The second part of this business case is about having good recycling facilities. And obviously the preferred route is to first have an anaerobic digestion, where you squeeze out all the energy, and then with the rest you compost it, and you can produce nice compost if you mix it together with garden waste, which you can use to grow your new plants on, and to have your new food. So then the circle is around again, and that composting will probably largely happen in the advanced countries in a centralized composting installation. But in other countries, home composting might also be an option, and which makes more sense maybe. Depends on the local situation. But without a good recycling infrastructure, collection will not work. It goes hands in hand. So the one needs the other. So therefore, it's a two-sided business case. And the fourth business case is about adding more value in the recycling by producing products with more value. So there are now a couple of examples which actually provide, which move higher on the hierarchy, which I showed you before. And one of them is that you can grow eatable mushrooms on coffee grounds. So if you collect the coffee ground specifically, you can grow mushrooms out of it, but you can also make soap out of it. So actually, if you have that specific coffee ground trap, for example, collected separately from restaurants, you can actually produce directly new food. Another one is the citrus peels. If you collect those separately, or make sure, for example, from industrial waste streams, then you can produce essential oils, chemicals, and animal feed, which is actually quite has an added value. And last but not least, which has also been tested, for example, in Africa, is the black soldier fly. The black soldier fly, the larvae eat the food waste, and that provides input for natural oils, animal feed, and compost. So actually, this is because it can be used directly as animal feed. It's a replacement for animal feed which we produce based on sea sources, and therefore it has not only direct impact of recycling it, but it is also a replacement for materials which is also a scarce material in our seas. So those are the 4 business cases. If you look into those business cases and see where are your investment opportunities, actually each business case provides various investment opportunities, which create value for people, planet, and profit. So if you're in the software, there are apps, tools, and trackings which are needed and which will be extended. One very interesting example I saw here is that they now have plates in the supermarkets which are dynamic. So the price of the product changes when it moves towards the deterioration date, and so the price goes down. And that's an interesting tool which will have a large growth potential. Investing in communication and behavior techniques, that's for something which is interesting as well. What we saw from our experiments is that actually behavioral knowledge is needed. So if you want to have the right behavior. Packaging, there are still opportunities to change packaging, which increases or decreases food waste. Bins and bags, especially for collection, you need the bins and bags. We need more kitchen bins. We need more to facilitate people. Collection and recycling infrastructure, obviously, where there's not a proper collection and or recycling infrastructure in place or can be improved, there are investments needed. And value of added recycling technologies such as mushroom or citrus peels or even other waste streams, which we can use as a high-end product. And maybe in the long run, we can even produce pharma out of it. And then you have like a really high added value. So thank you very much for your attention. Please contact me if you want to have any support or have any questions. We could discuss now for 10 minutes some questions, and after that I need to, I'm very sorry, I need to leave. So if you have any questions or would like to contact afterwards, please send me an email or a message, and I will get back to you. So I think for now, I would like to know, is there anyone who has a question or something that you would like to discuss?
Great, thank you for the presentation, Gijs. It was really interesting to see what can be done with food waste. I have one question from my side. I'm not sure in which regions do you work, if you work worldwide, but just looking at different countries, like where would you say is the biggest need for something to be done about food waste? Which country or which region?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And actually, my answer is very simple. In every country. And the reason for that is that we all have food waste. It differs in terms of what type of food waste it is. But in developing countries, the percentage of food waste is around 50 to 60% of total waste. In developed countries, it's less. It's like it's only maybe 30% or 20%, depending on how you calculate it. But in developed worlds, we have much more waste. So actually, if you turn it around in volumes, then probably we in developed countries have more waste.
Okay.
And it also depends on if you have your perspective from a carbon emission point of view, then probably the countries where you go and look first would look first is where they don't have a correct a good working recycling facilities in place, because there it ends up in landfills which are not managed correctly. So there the large emissions take place.
Okay. But then, so for the developing countries or markets where there's the bigger need for this, where there's more waste, what would you say is the opportunities to actually facilitate this? Would it be the actual facilities, investing in more recycling facilities, or is it more about creating awareness and informing the people on what to actually do with this and how they can do, starting small?
In developed countries?
Yes. No, not
I
developed,
think
sorry,
it's a little bit of both.
emerging.
Oh, sorry, in emerging countries.
Yes.
Also there, I think it's a little bit of both. For sure, awareness helps if people are more aware. And it's what I said with behavioral change. You need three things: infrastructure, capacity, and motivation. So if people don't have the infrastructure, they will not recycle it.
No.
If they don't have the motivation or the capacity, it won't happen either. So you need all three of those. So I think for people to have it work, you need to have all those three things in place. For countries to have it work, well, it depends on the strategy you choose. Whether you have very localized recycling facilities or even at home composting, or that you have centralized facilities. And that will differ per region or per country what's most viable. But I think in the end, food waste is something which, especially in emerging countries, ends up now largely at landfills. And that's probably not the right place where it should be ending.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. We got a few questions now. If you still have a moment, are you still fine?
Yes, please. Yeah.
There's one there that might have been answered. How can food waste be profitable for impact investors? And there's a few questions there continuing with that. Maybe if you can answer all of those. You see from Robert.
Yeah, there are companies around which are already profitable. For example, one which is from a African point of view also very interesting is Agri Protein. They have the Black Soldier farms operated. They started in South Africa, and they're now actually exporting that concept all around the world. There are actually companies, especially in the recycling, which are very interesting to have a look at. The citrus, which I meant, citrus peels. That's a company in the Netherlands, and they have already a recycling. They are now have just closed the finance round to to set up the first plant. So if you dig a little bit one layer deeper, what are the companies which are setting up those recycling facilities? I think there's very interesting investment potential.
Okay, thanks. Hope that answers our question. From Deborah, there is a lot of post-harvest loss waste, but there is a lack of logistics. What would you suggest? Maybe that was also sort of answered with the previous one on the facilities, but on logistics, you have any comment on that?
Is this about household waste or agri-food waste?
I think agri-food, the post-harvest.
There's a lot of post-harvest loss waste, but there's a lack of logistics. Yeah, I think in general, but I'm not sure whether this will answer the questions, is that collection is not a business case in itself. You always need to have, it's a cost. So it will need to deliver something which has value for somebody. If there's a lack of logistics, I would suggest that first, is there a client who is interested in the collected materials, and who is willing to pay for it, or is there another business model which comes in place which actually pays for the logistics?
Okay, so there's a whole new opportunity actually in that if some of the farms have the logistical issue, then that would help from the logistics, and then obviously offering them the better food waste or putting that to use. Okay, I hope that answered the questions. Yeah, like I said, if there's any other questions, feel free to reach out to him. There is his contact details as well. If needed, then we can share it as well with all the audience. But thank you once again for joining, Gijs. It was good having you here. Thank you for everyone who viewed, and that brings the Investment Food Forum 2020 to an end as well. Thank you, Gijs.
Yes, thank you.
Good. Thank you, everyone.